Welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today, very excited to have Kyle Rowland on the show. We got all sorts of interesting topics lined up. The engineering leadership impedance mismatch. I love the use of vocab here. This is stretching my mind. Context-free agile and technical practices. The nature and role of empiricism. And if there's time, the 1 to 40 rule. But before we get to that, Kyle, can you give an introduction for yourself?
Sure. My name is Kyle Rowland. I'm a consultant doing work for advising organizations for leadership and software engineering, that kind of thing. Been a software engineer, a software engineering leader for about 20 years, started on Apple IIs and Ataris and have made my way across to more powerful platforms as of late.
Oh, come on, the Atari. Why would you ever leave that? Nice. All right. Well, I'm really super curious on this engineering leadership impedance mismatch. So get us going here.
Yeah, so it's a fascinating thing. So again, my career has gone back about 20, 25 years, and I've seen a lot of these patterns sort of repeatedly. And this is a really interesting one, and I think it snags a lot of engineering organizations, a lot of leaders, is the idea of looking at what we're building and sort of that being sort of the business driver. We're in an organization and we're there to serve a customer, serve a user, and so clearly it's very important the features that we're building, the actual software systems that we're building. And then when you start to talk to engineers, if having been an engineer, the question is, okay, but how are we building it? And so there's this sort of disconnect on both sides of this that can really become a challenge if it's not handled well. So, for example, we can get really, really passionate about getting the features out the door, and we can hack things together and find ourselves in a place where it's really difficult to continue, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. Or on the opposite side of that spectrum, we can be really, really passionate about our technical practices. We can be really, really clever and lose the thread in terms of we're actually trying to actually build something useful for a human being. And so the impedance mismatch, I think, is a lot around the idea that my business is a little bit around coaching leaders specifically for how they operate their organizations. As you start to move into that leadership perspective, a lot of serving the business really comes down to, the one side of the equation, which is how do we get features into people's hands? How do we get product out the door? And without some care, the other side of that can readily get lost. So does that make sense in terms of the actual tension?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting on one side of that typically, but yeah, and I've definitely seen it go sour before, where something with a lot of features, but it gets kicked out of app stores, or something with a lot of features, but it's a nightmare to extend or maintain. I've definitely lived that cycle several times, and I think I have some thoughts, and I'm sure Chris does too. But what's your general guidance towards helping resolve this
Resolve it? Yeah.
impedance? Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of it, and I think the current state of the industry is one thing, and then I'll talk a little bit about sort of what I think might be the ideal. But what you have is frontline leaders, or even up to the CTO, when they really they have when they come from the engineering background and they really have perspective around, we need to build things well. We need to pay attention to the microarchitecture. We need to do TDD. We need to pair and mob and do the technical practices that make software maintainable. Then they can put the energy on that, and they can put the focus on it, and drive their teams towards it. But what I found is that's a lot of that can be a little bit of an uphill battle, even as the leader, trying to fight those. And I think really the ultimate solution, and you guys, I'd love feedback on this too, to me, is to really recognize that software development is invention, and invention isn't quite the same as the operational types of things that one might end up leading. So Stephen Covey in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, he has this fantastic metaphor for the difference between leadership and management. And I think the same concept or context applies to, leadership versus operations or that kind of thing. And he said, the management side is when you're going around hacking your way through a jungle and counting the number of trees you've cut down and making sure you're getting your quota in and all of that kind of thing. And then leadership on the other side of that is climbing up on the ladder and saying, are we in the right jungle? And so that's great. And it's a powerful metaphor, particularly for traditional enterprise. But I think for software engineering enterprises, it breaks down. And I think that it breaks down because actually climbing up on the ladder and looking around to warp the metaphor a little bit is actually non-trivial. And so, in software, we use things like Agile and incremental delivery and this kind of thing that's actually us climbing the ladder, but it's actually really hard work to climb the ladder and figure out what the right direction is to go. So to me, the ultimate solution, I think, is that we get a mental model that is more in line with the fact that we're leading teams of inventors, where figuring out what direction we're going is actually a whole activity that we need to lead in itself. Does that kind of make sense?
Definitely. Yeah.
So are you referring to that as at the level of road mapping or at the level of technical discovery, or I guess what level are you referring to when you say, kind of looking at the broader aspects of what you're attacking?
Yeah. So really, so it's the whole thing really. And the way I would say it is like the traditional view from the C-suite or whatever is we're going to build this thing. And so I need my CTO, my VP of engineering or whoever, I need you to lead so that we can get that thing. And so the shift in mental model would be, okay, you want me to lead in building the thing. And so what you're saying is you want me to climb up on the ladder and look around where the right direction is to go in terms of building the online book sales or the shopping cart or whatever specific set of features. But the real twist to that, I think, is that you've really got two things that you can potentially be leading. And since we're inventors when we're doing software development, if we get in and lead on the tactical, what features are we building, we make ourselves necessary, and I say we, but whoever's leading the software engineering effort makes themselves a bottleneck to the invention, because the bandwidth on an inventing effort is entirely cognitive. And so the leading that a software engineering leader could better do or should better do is far more around enabling the system, enabling the invention. So to be really concrete, I have a tendency to be overly abstract, so forgive me.
Great.
Is that, so for example, from the top of an organization down, how are the teams structured? Are they Conway aware? Like, are they structured such that they're not sharing software? Are the teams doing TDD? Are they building things with microarchitecture that's modular? All the stuff that makes inventing more, that enables inventing, is the stuff that even all the way up to the top of organization would get better return out of leading, if that makes sense.
Nice. Yeah. What comes to mind to me is that you mentioned like system, and I think coaching myself and coaching those around me, like on a dev team, and coaching the rest of the organization, start thinking holistically as a system. I think, or as Chris would say, the side effects of the side effects, it becomes really important, because if I only care about how it's built, like it runs into that problem you were talking about.
Yes.
And some people only care about what's built. It's very problematic. So even though, I might have a particular specialty, like maybe I'm stronger in the how it's built, I should care deeply about what we're building and if we're getting, good feedback, right? Like, automate that feedback or make it easy, right? Climbing that ladder super easy, to know if we're on track or not, or if we're just, blindly going in the wrong direction, but very efficiently. Right. Um, and then helping leaders understand stakeholders, clients, customers,
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter, just what we built, but how we build it, they're going to care about very deeply, right? Like,
Yeah.
telling stories of horror stories might be good. Like, hey, there's this story in the organization in the past where the quick and dirty thing was done and we got a ton of features, but now the store got, the app got kicked out of the store, or
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
we can hardly touch the thing without, making 20 bugs, because it's so fragile, right? And so the, you know, analogy I've used recently is like, if I have a car and I'm getting work done on it, I just don't care that the work gets done. I don't want the car to blow up in 20 miles, right? You know what I mean? Like, how
Yeah.
it gets worked on is important as well. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I come from my base perspective is very much on the how things get built. So like I'm very
Yeah.
passionate about solid principles and TDD and making sure things are structured well so that they're readable. But there's an interesting thing because there's this meme that goes around social all the time about, it's we don't want clever development, we want good development for whatever that means. And there's a piece of that holds a real truth to it, in that you can spend your time navel gazing and making the exactly perfect abstraction for whatever that means. But the real, on both sides of the equation, the real piece to pull at that, because again, I talked at first about like getting it right from the leadership side, but getting it right from the how it's built side is very much about, okay, what are we doing? What is our purpose here? What problem are we solving? And then realizing that if we're using software to do that, the only way that we can do that well sustainably is to do it as fast as possible. And the only way to do that is then ... start thinking about technical practices. So really, to me, the thing that's worked when I've coached people and mentored people through this is like, we don't do these things because they're cool and we can write blogs about them. We do them because it allows us to deliver faster. More delivery means more experiments and more value. That value gives us return. That return is our paycheck. And just so drawing all those connections kind of really, to me, is how I think about it.
Nice. Right on. Yeah, Chris, I don't know if you got any more, or if this is a good pivot
No, no,
to.
I think it just reminds me of a few stories. Like one, I was a part of a team a long time ago that, we kind of thought we were getting feedback all the time, but it was from a very isolated source. And so, still the feedback was positive in the direction we were going, but then we realized that person was isolated from the rest of the environment, and then discovered that all of that work was waste.
Okay.
And so there's something about broadcasting that intent that I think counts as leadership, and not
Yes.
just letting it go isolated. So yeah, it was kind of a thing that came to mind. I guess the other piece is just like the high level road mapping all the way down to the tactical code that's being worked on. I think that it's very easy um, to just focus on the area that you're concerned about, rather, and count on others to push you in the right direction. And often I think in the industry you see a lot of people not doing the trust but verify in that regard, and getting themselves into a bad spot.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because that's really one of the areas that I've repeatedly seen that pop up, is that at that point where, again, coming from the engineering side of my brain of like, I want to crawl off in a corner with my code and my coffee and do the stuff, and it's like the real win is, and again, there's two sides to this. So from the engineering side, the real win, you can't really build a solution so you can't invent for a problem that you don't understand. So that's the kind of first side of it. I think when we talk about the high level roadmaps all the way down, I think in my ideal world, and again, I know I have not seen my ideal world play out in a concrete organization necessarily, but like that whole idea of a high level roadmap should be in the hands of the small two pizza team that's delivering the thing. And so
Right.
should it, how does it get pushed down? Should it get pushed down? It should start from, the people that are doing the inventing. And so the question that follows on from that, and that gets kind of back to it, is okay, well, then what do the leaders do? The leaders keep the structure from crumbling and do the cross organization things that keep the inventing happening as fast as possible. There's two pieces that a lot of leaders don't grab onto, is that there's a huge amount of entropy when it comes to software practices. The stuff
Right.
just falls apart if there's no focus put on it. And falling apart, the way that looks, just to be really clear, is it looks like it gets slower and slower and slower and more expensive and more expensive and more expensive. And so it's easy to forget about that and to say, oh, we're just having bad luck. No, it takes concerted effort to really focus on that. And it is a full-time job. And that's what the leaders should be doing if they're worried about that. And so to me, that in my Kyle's ideal world, that sort of ultimately resolves the impedance mismatch. And I think that's where we end up. I think we're moving towards that as an industry. But it's when we get there, we get really super powered, I think, either as an organization or as an industry.
Nice. Yeah. And so speaking of systems,
Yeah.
are you saying I can't just cut something out like TDD and just plop it into any context and it'll just work wonderfully? So what's this nonsense you speak of context-free agile and technical practices?
Oh, that was a good rotation. Yeah. Or the other one that's my one of my favorite is TBD. So one of the a big, really powerful practice that's I think folks are starting to get their heads around is the trunk-based development, which is maybe a dated version now, maybe main-based. I don't know, but the idea of not using any branches and really just committing to a single line and then having that all automated. And one of the quickest bits of feedback when you go and you talk, hey, this is a good idea in the industry. We could never do that. And the fact is you're probably right when you say that, because there are about 15 things that you have to get right in order for that to not kind of destroy everything as you go. So so yes, the same honestly is true with TDD. There's a lot of skill and understanding and the decomposition. There's this whole tree of sort of procedural dependency and that has to sort of be in place at least to a little bit before you start doing some of these other things. So that's, if that gets to what you were saying.
Yeah, you're right. Like, Chris was showing me the picture from Liminal Thinking book, and it was like the world of your self-isolated obviousness, right? And then underneath
Yes.
that is like beliefs and assumptions and all experiences and all that kind of stuff. And so yes, and then so you take something out of my isolated bubble and throw it over to someone else's, and then they interpret it in their assumptions, environment,
Yep.
belief, and experiences. And you're right. Like I said, you're right. You're right in saying that they're right. That it's probably impossible given those things. But right, yeah. So how do you go deeper? How do you get beyond this this almost impasse of two
Yeah.
different worlds
Yeah.
talking? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's really a key piece of this is understanding that there's really two ways of thinking about practices or everything we do. There's sort of an implicit way and there's an explicit way. So I think, or these are my terms for it. I don't know if they're standard or anything, but implicit is when you basically intuitively come to a solution and it works for you and you love it and you might tell everybody about it, but you can't actually make a case about it because you don't understand the logic of it yourself explicitly. On the other hand, you've got things. So like when I first picked up TDE and got turned on by it, I was like, I was like, this is amazing. It just does stuff that makes me feel really good. And I didn't know how to explain that to anybody. If you spend time thinking about it and chewing on it, you can make a more explicit case, and that's when you can actually communicate it to other people. And so there's nothing wrong with intuition and implicit thinking and coming across things and doing them because they feel like they're the right thing to do. There's something wrong with trying to have other people do that without giving them a rational case, because you have to be rational in order to communicate. And specifically in software, the thing that fixes all of this, I'm convinced, is to dial all of this back up to what your purpose is as an organization. So say I'm in a banking organization and I want to enable people's banking or whatever. I want to write software that enables people banking. I want to do this. Okay, great. I want to write software. That means, again, and this is standard across everywhere. Everybody who writes software, this is true. If you move faster, all other things being equal, not hacking things, but actually move faster, you are better able, you can do more experiments, and you just simply deliver sooner, which makes something more valuable. So for those two reasons, you're making more valuable software. You're making more, and you're putting more value into the hands of the customer. So if we start from that and reason back, then suddenly, and spend our time thinking about TBD or TDD or mobbing or pairing or pick a thing, CI/CD or whatever. And when we tie it back and show the connection and draw the dots, that's the explicit reasoning that then is useful for making a conversation or decision around these. But again, I've seen it. The reason I call it context-free, fill in the blank, is because I've been in so many organizations where we fight and fight and fight, and everybody's just throwing their subjective, intuitive, implicit ideas back and forth. It's like we have no basis to even discuss it, but yet we're all getting mad at each other and ruining our culture. And so
nice. Yes. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it kind of reminds me of the Start with Why, book, and yeah. Additionally, so I do like the creating the context idea, and I guess avoiding the cargo cult, I guess, or like, and so I guess so entropy is constantly happening, and then there's a divergence of ideas about why you do something. So how do you rein that back in? What is it that, like, what are the tactical things that need to be done for, a small, medium, large organization, whatever it might be? Like, how do you go about that?
yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So the first thing is just, again, assuming all other things are equal, having rational decisions, starting from, shared goals and principles, and really getting that clear. And that, that, like John Maxwell says, vision leaks. So having that, regularly clarified is an important thing. And then on the other side of that is just having discussions without pressure. So one of the other things, I'm sure this is only me that this has ever happened to. One of the other things is that talk about matters of principle and deeply held beliefs when we've got a deadline that is going to chop all our heads off. And that is the worst possible time to have a discussion about deeply held beliefs. So eliminating those two things, or doing those two things, is probably the first piece of it. When I first started leading development teams, this is probably, 12 or 15 years ago, one of the other pieces is to help people to get to a place where they're good at having hard discussions. And so I've already name dropped it here, but one of the best pieces on that is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Yeah. And so one of the things that I did was took my couple of teams or whatever it was, and we had a sit down on Thursday afternoons or Friday afternoons and went through front to back 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, discussed it, internalized it, and it just made our ability to discuss things that much better. Because I mean, and we could have a whole other episode on this about all of the principles that are important for having good discussions, thinking win-win, thinking synergy, thinking about, how you're taking initiative and being proactive, and all the 7 habits stuff is a really, in terms of, it's a longer term play. So this isn't microwave stuff, but that's definitely a piece that's high leverage, is getting that well ingrained in your team's culture.
Yeah, and that highlights kind of going back and forth between the leaders and the teams and that kind of thing. I think as a leader, you're in a really good place to make room for that kind of thing, right? Like you said, to keep the system and structure in place, give
Yep.
people permission to learn, permission to discuss those things and have time for that. Because I think unless you explicitly do that, I think the assumption is, oh, the leader's around, however high up they are. I need to be doing something incredibly valuable this moment with wasting no time, right? And so, and what incredibly valuable probably looks like in my head when I'm in panic mode is like grab a shovel and dig. Even if I'm in the living room and there's carpet and it's going to do something terrible, like it's like,
Yes.
um, and so, yeah, because, yeah, to find a win-win and, find out what North Star we're all going towards and what we have in common, it takes time, right? And um, I've hit that wall before. Some people jump into that readily. Some people tend to avoid it, and then so we're just kind of at an impasse, and I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure what to do with that. But yeah, getting the environment in a place where people are more comfortable to go into the assumptions, go into the deeply held beliefs, go into the whys, and come out of it. We usually come out stronger as a team because we find our common goals, or we find out that, hey, you're going to help me do my goal better because you know things I don't, or stuff like that. Yeah. Um, and maybe this is a pivot to the nature role of empiricism, because we're talking about principles and values and habits.
Yeah.
Is that an empirical thing? Is it a philosophical thing? Are we empiricists? Are we idealists? What are we? Where are you
Yeah.
at on this, Kyle?
I think the line is in the same place. I think one of the Agile Manifesto, for all of its glory and all of the wonderful things it's done in the industry, has gotten maybe a little long in the tooth in some of this, in that the way it suggested empiricism was that it was almost an unalloyed good in every case. And there's really, because we sort of hinted at this a little bit when we were talking earlier, there's really, when you're building software, there's 2 systems you're building. There's the people system, and then there's the actual computer system. And so these things, and this is really the core of that impedance mismatch that we were talking about, because they move at different speeds, they deal with different types of things, and this kind of thing. And so when we talk about empiricism, so the manifesto is like, we're finding better ways to build software, right? Well, the fact is we've learned a lot of really good ways to build software, and a lot of that we can decide upon in an a priori fashion. So we can reason from, again, and that's kind of, this has been the theme of what we've been talking about. We know what our goal is, we know how it works in software, and so we should do these things. Because and that fits for the building the people system far better than it does for building the computer system. When we're building the actual software, we can't not be empirical. Like, we have to do things and try it and do things and try it because we're inventing. That we cannot avoid that. And again, just to step back and talk about the difference between empirical and a priority type reasoning, the latter is faster, and if you can do it, you should do it, but you have to have a set of principles that you've arrived at empirically to do that. And so, when we're constructing the people system, but there is a lot of that we can talk about and reason about in that sort of way and get things done more quickly. Further, the other challenge is we simply, when we're building the computer system, we have potentially thousands of data points per second, right? If we have these scaled apps, we can get all sorts of feedback really fast across a vast array of experiments. It's fantastic. When we're deciding, what interpersonal experiment, how are we going to restructure the org? We can't run 100 experiments on that in any reasonable amount of time. There have been hundreds and thousands of experiments like that run, but it's been across the industry. And so again, there's a lot of things that are starting to sort of settle that you can make a priority sort of conversations around. So for example, to be concrete again, is like the idea of Conway aware organizational structures. So having teams that are top to bottom fully responsible for their systems, having those teams separate from other teams, like this, we can reason about how this is going to make you faster, how it's going to get more value out of the door. You don't have to try to run an experiment for that. Really, you don't. And because of that, we can get to where we want to go. We can get to the place where we're delivering more value a lot faster. And again, the impedance mismatch really on this part, on the role of empiricism, is that with software, when we're coding, when we're building things, we have to be empirical. It's unavoidable. And so otherwise we would just be copying and pasting. So I don't know, does that clarify it or does it make it muddier?
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, go ahead first, Chris. You got anything?
Yeah, so while I like the idea of empiricism, I think I find, most often that everything ends up being often subjective choices, and whether or not people go for the empirical evidence presented, or they question the validity of that evidence.
Yep.
Or just use anecdotal stories to drive away from that. So I often find myself looking for empirical evidence to approach a problem, but then leaning heavily on stories and emotional triggers to shift behaviors. Do you have any thoughts on, I guess, the aspects of the absence of empiricism on teams, and especially around technical practices, and bridging that gap, or do you not find that that's the issue?
Yeah, so you're talking about, like, when you say absence of empiricism, you mean like trying to make a decision based on data, but making it based on anecdotal, non-data type of things?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I see or experience most often. It's like, yes, there have been many studies done, and TED is like a good practice, right? But then a lot of people are like, I just hate doing it. Right? And so, depending on the environment, I think, you're really at risk of running into that. And so, I think a lot about maybe Linda Rising's talks, and the diffusion of innovation, and how like in it's more like caveman style of, like, if your entire tribe is starving and there are berries, right? There are gonna be a lot of people that eat the berries, but there'll be some that are gonna that say, I'll wait, right? And then they just wait and see whether or not everybody else has like died from eating the berries, right? And so it's like a very fundamental human thing to have skepticism, and I guess that in a sense, like, those few people are looking for empirical evidence about whether or not those are safe, um, but then some are just driven by that emotion, and so I don't, I guess my question is around how often do we run into people that find empiricism essential,
Yeah.
and then and then how do we shift the conversation in the proper direction, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that is huge too. Because there was one of my early-ish in my career. So this was circa 2007, I think, and it was so Well, you'll get the time frame based on the tools that I mentioned. So the team that I was on, we got really excited about. So this was JSP, ASP, PHP era, where you have code inside the HTML for days. Some of the code in our JSPs was 2,000, 3,000 lines long. And so very excited to get into a server side, mind you, MVC framework. And so we get, so I started off writing, I think, in struts. And then there was a discussion about, oh, struts isn't the latest thing. There's Spring MVC now and Spring MVC 2.0, and there's this other thing, and we should have a conversation about it. Okay. So we ended up having a 6-month conversation to choose the flavor of MVC framework that we were going to use. And so I don't know if there's a lesson to extract from that other than this happens all the time, and it's really kind of one of the hard parts of software engineering. The thing that I really take to some of this now is to the greatest extent possible, I view software developers as artists. I will not question your favorite flavor of paintbrushes. I don't care if you use Go, Rust, Java, C#, C++, assembly language. If you got the guts to write a web app in assembly language, I'm not going to, but a lot of it, so much of it is there's really the empiricism of diving in and figuring out what's objectively better is, maybe not even worth the time and effort. And there's so much that's like that. MVC frameworks, languages, you name it. And so one of the things is I try as an engineer, as a leader, is just to have as much grace as possible for, if somebody's excited about something, let them run with it. I have the extreme view that even among teams, I don't care if we use 3 different programming languages. If they turn people on, let's do it. Try something out. Maybe we rewrite stuff later and refactor. It really, all the languages are more or less the same for all the talking that goes on. Yeah, there are some things we could talk about features that are better in some languages than others. But the point being, so much of it is at least subjective enough that the analysis isn't worth the effort. So that's sort of the first piece. Now you talk about things like TDD and TBD and pairing and other practices where there's a clear case to be made that the technique arrives at, or even let's not do the latest hotness, Agile, Scrum, basic stuff like iterating, doing small releases. That there's so much argument to be made around that let's have that fight. It's, I guess the short of it is, if you're not in a position, pick the battles that you want to fight. And some of these battles are really, really, really worth fighting. Some of them not so much. Now, as a leader, I'm not going to hire somebody who says I'll never TDD. I'm also going to really consider if they need to stay on the team if they're saying I'm not TDD, because I know, and I will gladly have the conversation with anybody who will listen, that this is a practice that arrives at a better business outcome, and we are wasting money to spend it on people that won't adopt it, or that won't at least adopt it, let alone have an active practice in it. And I would definitely prefer somebody with an active practice over somebody that didn't. Does that kind of answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I resonate with your story. I've been in that shoes a lot. I think the more experience that I've got, the more I don't care about the framework in the language or, whatever that. I remember I was on a team once where they were really disheartened in some older languages and technology. And I was having a great time because if I have TDD, I'm fine, But just shifting technology and language got them all excited. And then we had an engaged team, and I'm like, sure, whatever. Like, I don't, I don't care. And I think going back to your scientist or philosopher thing, I think just to put my cards on the table, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're saying something similar, is that we are people, and as people, we're both, right? Both things matter, and both things are objective and different and helpful in different times and places. So it's just whatever's needed in that moment, right? So if an experiment can be run that's cheap and safe, do it. if not, if it's going to take 6 months of bugs to run that experiment, I might make the case on philosophical grounds, right? You know what I mean? Or things like that. And maybe that leads to an impasse. But I'm not going to put my name on 6 months of bugs, or something like that, right? And so and you don't have to take my specific stance on bugs and these practices, but I think the idea is that there's, or you said, Chris, emotional appeal and things like that in stories. Like, I think there's times and places for both. And I think the thing to being a good team member or leader is just knowing when to pull out which tool, not
Yep.
as manipulation, but as, this seems helpful in this situation. So,
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
nice. Cool. Well, I guess we do have a little bit of time. We'd hit all four. Wow. You might set a record for the show for most intended topics we're going to hit. Yeah. What are you thinking on the 1 to 40 rule?
Yeah, this is a one where I'm controversial. I get beat up on this all the time, but I have the CEO at NVIDIA back me up on this. The idea is that, again, because of the what a software engineering leader should actually be doing, if they have fewer than 40 reports, and you have multiple managers, you're doing something wrong. So back in 10, 15 years ago, I remember I talked to a lot of sort of technology leadership up in the Seattle area where I used to work and live. And there was this real fad, and I think it's still continuing, having like frontline managers that have 4 or 5 direct reports and this kind of thing. And it's just very, very, very wasteful. And again, the solution to it is really getting the engineering leaders out of the questions of tactical delivery. And I'm not even talking about code. I'm talking about like out of the critical path of the specific features that are going out of the door, having any conversation about that, and getting their minds on structural things, all the stuff that we've already talked about. One of the challenges, and people are like, how do you have one-on-ones with 40 people? You won't need one-on-ones with 40 people if you're not stepping on their toes every 5 minutes over what color the button is. And so this is the big piece of that, is that if you're leading the right thing, and again, the right thing being the structural sort of people and technology system as opposed to the actual building of the software system, you should be able to handle at least in the range of 40 reports as a leader. And you may have a smaller development. Your organization may be smaller such that you only have 10 developers, but you shouldn't be hiring managers as soon as you've surpassed five reports, that type of thing. If does that make sense? Agree, disagree?
Yeah. What do you think, Austin?
I don't know. You first.
Well, yeah. So I'm a big fan of the idea. I think if you need to have managers, then the best thing to do is to make them sort of like HR liaisons, in order to allow for to work around any organizational requirements that there be managers, because there's probably quite a lot. Like when you look at a software manager that has a few, 3 or 4, 5 direct reports, it's almost too granular. And I think this is what you're getting at. It's too granular of a control and would produce like widely differing behaviors, and philosophies across these teams. So that's like one thing. But also they could, people naturally will start talking to them first rather than the person they need to talk to because they're afraid to go to the next level down. And there's all kinds of these like weird organizational habits that come out of having that. So, I'm a big fan of like either flat or if you can't be flat, then emulate flat. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And I think just a yes and onto that is, you didn't say it quite like this, Chris, but it's kind of how it registered in my mind was if you're experiencing the problem as you were describing, Kyle, it's almost kind of like a organizational smell or like analogous to a code smell, where it's kind of like if a high up leader needs to be like not sleeping and involved in the details of 40 different teams or 40 different people, there's something missing in the system, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of goes back to the origin of the mob programming movement that Woody and Chris and others talk about, where a lot of problems fade away,
Yeah.
where and I think coaching, mentoring, kind of that kind of involvement happens naturally in a healthy mob,
Yeah.
and that the company or organization structure of forcing that upon people is just kind of extra, not needed,
Yeah.
superfluous, right, or redundant at a certain point. And that doesn't mean you don't want to seek coaching outside of your current team or mob, and you should have the system should have structures and ways to do that, but it doesn't need to be the formal director to or manager to employee relationship. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess we're coming up on time. Is there anything you'd like to share or plug before we close?
Yeah, actually, a lot of the stuff that we talked about today is really central to a book I just put out, Powerful, Profitable Software Products, the Executive Guidebook. Basically, just all the stuff we're hashing out, all the first principles, starting from how we think about the problems, all the way up to the specific practices and what that looks like, all across, all the way from the engineering level to the leadership level is kind of what it is. So if you're just starting an engineering shop, or you're scaling it or remediating it, it kind of gives you a one-stop shop for doing that. So so pretty excited about that. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Some great
thanks for having me.
topics.
It's been a blast.
Yeah, spanning engineering, leadership, how and what, TDD, trunk-based development. We got even to philosophy and science questions.
That's right, we did,
and
didn't we?
all kinds of fun stuff. So yeah, thanks for bringing such rich conversation to the show, Kyle, to us and our audience. I know I've learned a lot, and I bet people are too. And to our audience, please like and subscribe. Please reach out. Let us know what you liked about this episode, what you disagreed with, your stories, your examples. We'd love to hear it. And until next time, mob on everyone, and have a good one. Adios.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.